Hello YouTube, this is Hunter Search of the Brawler Cafe, bringing you a new Tuesday analysis video. So, for the next 5 Tuesday analysis videos, we are going to be diving into the new mechanics, the new keywords that the factions got. Each one is shared by 2 factions, which are faction combinations that we previously saw on Shield Cores and Fist Cores. So yeah, we're going to spend the next 5 videos talking about those keywords, how good they function currently with just Armored Elite, all of the dual faction cards for those faction combinations with the exception of the flips, because those are very easy to surmise, and we're going to have a different video talking about the flips a bit later, just flips in general, because I haven't done an update on that whole situation since my original flips video early this year, or last year when we get into some of these later ones. But regardless, we are going to be talking about that. So let's dive into it. For our first one, we're going to be looking at the keyword given to Pyrus+Haos, Empower. Empower is a keyword that allows you to get an additional effect by paying 3 energy when you're playing that card, when you're resolving that card, like Sacrifice. It's an additional cost to get an additional effect. So before we really talk about Empower, and I wanted to cover this one first, specifically because there are a few cards in its card pool that I feel are being subjected to some overhype, and they are of decent rarity, so I want to cover them before to make sure I get this video out before the set drops, so that no one ends up wasting their money without being warned that, hey, this card might not be so good. So let's get into it. Before we really get into Empower, there are a couple cards that we need to talk about to basically establish things. But before we do that, we have one dual card that I want to talk about because it's completely unrelated to basically everything else we're going to be talking about. That is R Obliterator. As far as Pyrus+Haos cards go, this doesn't really fit into the Empower archetype. However, this card is just standalone incredible. It's 2 cost plus 700B. It's going to be amazing. This card heavily encourages you to run Pyrus+Haos, and it's just absurd. It's just I don't know what else I can say. It's just really, really good, and really overtuned, considering how this game heavily this is something I'm going to talk about in a future video. But I think compared to games like Magic, dual faction cards should not be as powerful, not be as much more powerful than normal cards, because of how the game disincentivizes you from playing mono faction decks and almost requires you to be running triple faction decks. But that's going to be a subject for another video. Let's get into the Empower enablers. These are really important to understand before we really start talking about the Empower cards. First, we have Chaotic Flare. So this is going to highlight a design sense that I really like in this set. So this card and one card for Rapid Fire are 1 cost dual cards that have a Fireball effect, which is 1 cost plus 3 damage. Which is not a fantastic effect, but is low cost enough and efficient enough that I've seen played in the past. And it attaches onto that effect an enabler effect for their keyword. So in the case of Chaotic Flare, it has the effect that the next card you play this turn, you may use its Empower effect for free. So that 3 energy cost we talked about doesn't exist for the next card. And the other cards that we're going to touch on regarding Empower enablers are basically the same thing. Next up, we have Dan and Leah. So Dan and Leah is a 4 cost hero, comes down, and you may empower cards for free as long as this is on the board. And the last card that does this sort of thing is Pyrus Titanius. We talked about this before in the top 15 Armored Elite Bakugan video. But this is 4 cost, 1205, and when it opens, you may empower the next card you play this turn for free. So these are all pretty solid Empower enablers. I would actually rate Dan and Leah the lowest of all of them. Rate Chaotic Flare as the best one, and Pyrus Titanius a bit below that. Dan and Leah I can only really see being worth if we end up with a full deck of Empower stuff. So let's get, with that out of the way, let's get into the Empower stuff itself. So first up, the Mono Haos action that with Empower is Hales Control. This card is actually one of the better Empower effects. The problem that we're going to run into with Empower is that like it has very high potential because those Empower enabling effects have a lot of potential to be good. But the Empower effects that they're enabling right now aren't very good and aren't in any way like worth building a deck around. Like they're not even on the level that say Titan Gorthion Aurelis was, which was the only good Battle Mastery card and the only card that made building around Magnus Living Arm of Tico really worth it. So we really need better Empower effects before we can really take advantage of those cards, but it gives this keyword extremely high potential. So, Hales Control is a 1 cost plus 3 damage, so basically it's a fireball, as we established before. It's a really cool design where we give like these fireball effects to these like 1 cost enabler cards, and stuff like that, or effects that we kind of want to push. It's a really smart design choice. One of the best design trends I saw in this entire set. I really want to give big ups to that because it's super good, super good. So it has the Empower effect to, as always, pay 3 energy. We're not going to talk about that every time because it's always pay 3 energy to get plus 3 Frost Strike. So if you've heard me talk about what makes a good Frost Strike card before, you'll know that it's a card that it's a Frost Strike card that is giving you more Frost Strike, or at least equal Frost Strike to the amount of energy your opponent has. So Hales Control is very capable of fitting that bill because it's a 1 cost that's able to give you 3 Frost Strike. Of course, you need an enable, so that it's probably not coming out until turn 2 or 3 at best, which is the big problem. That's what really stops this from being like any sort of good, at least right now. Pyrus+Haos, this is the new Air Zero, awesome rare, 3 costs, Air Zero effect, so you flip the top card of your deck. If it's a non-flip, you can play it. And as the Empower effect to return it to hand. This is not good. Air Zero is not good. Empower to loop this thing is not good either. Especially like this sort of effect is going to be especially bad in a complete Empower deck when that eventually happens, because you're going to end up with a decent chunk of cards in your deck that are built for enabling Empower. And once you have like one like Dan and Leah already in your deck, then it makes this not as great. Yeah. It forces you to run more dead cards that an Air Zero effect is not going to want to pull. Onto the dual cards, dual card actions. We have Focus Fire, which is 3 cost plus 500, and Empower plus Double Strike plus 3 Frost Strike. Not very good. Lackluster B power gain. I don't know. The dual card power, the power levels of the dual cards is like all over the place. Like we have ones like R Obliterator that are completely off the charts, and Chaotic Flare and Darkest Ash, like that are just really strong. But then we have ones like this that's just like, why? Like, this is a dual card. This is a power level that I could see being on a non-dual card. So why is this a dual card? It's just like plus 500 B is of course below curve. 3 Frost Strike at 3 energy is not great, and it needs an enabler for that to actually be 3 energy. And Double Strike is nice, but not something in general that's super valuable. And then here's the big hype card, and the real reason I want to talk about this keyword before any other. Spirit Speed is an SR, Hales Pyrus action, that allows you to play a non-flip from your hand for 5 costs or less. That is 5 costs or less for free, and it has the Empower effect to do it again. This is not good. This is the sort of card that you would own. Okay, so one, the big thing with this is that it's not a super fuel effect where it's reducing the next card you play by 3 energy. You have to play a 5 energy or less card, which means you're not getting much value out of this. With like you really need to be playing 5 energy cards to be getting value out of this. And the amount of deck space and specific combo pieces that would be required to take advantage of this with the Empower enablers is just, it's way too much, because you need the Empower enabler, you need this, and you need 2 good 5 costs for this to combo into. And then what about the other copies of all those cards? That's the big problem. This is not a very good card. The only place I would see playing this is if you were running a deck that had Pyrus+Haos already, and you really need to get like some higher costed card out quicker, like a 5 cost evil, like say Hyper Serpentes. You would never run Haos and Hyper Serpentes, Pyrus Hyper Serpentes, but if you did, I would definitely consider, like that's the sort of deck. That's the sort of the deck where you really want to get this big 5 cost out earlier. So you're running both Super Fuel and Song of Fire to do it. And you want additional copies of those cards. That is basically the only role Spirit Speed can fill right now. In the future, if Empower becomes more coherent as an archetype, then this card could be really good. If Empower as an archetype is given enough like 5 costs that this can really play into. But until then, this is not a very good card, and please, please, please do not get swept up in the hype on this card, because it is really, really not that good. If you can find a specific deck that fulfills the things I said regarding Super Fuel and Song of Fire, then great. But until you do, please don't buy into the hype of this card. I've seen way too many people hyping this card up, and I really don't want another situation to happen like Pyrus+Haos Core, where the card gets super overpriced, and I know people who buy it for that price, and then it's not that good, and they've wasted their money. Like, I really want to avoid a situation like that happening, if at all possible. If I can do something to try and stop that from happening, I want to. Okay. So, the monocolor hero for Empower is Pegatrix Video Star. This is actually probably one of the best Empower effects currently. So its Empower effect is on play, you draw 2, and it's only 2 cost, and when you team attack, you also draw 2. So this is a decently cheap hero that provides you with some good draw power. Like, this is the sort of thing that would be really good if we could like enable it with Empower, and even otherwise, like 2 costs for drawing 2 on team attack is not too bad. It's not too terrible. It's pretty comparable in quality to Colonel Armstrong Trip, which was the Hales draw power hero that you had to use. That if you wanted one, you had to use that. So you know, it's not too bad. I think this card has some decent potential, especially if Empower becomes a coherent archetype. Like, this would be pretty solid there. And there's also the fact that this is the 2 cost threshold. So like, if you play this down using Hales Shargo, this becomes free. So that's pretty solid. And also, another thing is that it's 2 cost specifically, which is, no, 2 cost is filled with Strata Aqua, so what am I talking about? Never mind. So, Empower gear, most of them, the keyword gears are really bad. But Rage Mask is 5 cost, plus 400B, plus 4 damage. And Empower, when you play it, you make a Pyrus attack for 5 damage. This is not great. This is, of course, asking 8 energy out of you. This is one of the higher potential Empower effects, but a random burn effect isn't that useful, to be honest. Like, just having a random burn effect in your deck isn't that useful, and this is still 5 energy, and far less efficient than other gear. Like, I don't know, I have a really hard time seeing this card ever be good. Hyper Pegatrix, so this is a 2 cost Evo, 707, its base form is 405, and Empower, when you play this, you draw 1. This is really bad. Like, if this was like, say, when you open this, draw 1, that might be decent, and when you power this, Empower to draw 1, I mean. That could be decent, but still really struggle being good because of that lackluster stat line. But with it only being on play, it's really, really bad. Like, it's abysmal. And lastly, we have Pyrus Hyper Nihilus Ultra, which is 3 energy, 708. We don't know its base form yet. But in Power, when you play this, you get, when you play this, Empower for plus 4 damage. Which is also not very good. You're empowering for an additional 4 damage for a single turn. It's a temporary 4 damage. Like, that's really bad. And we're already looking at 700B evolution for 3 energy. That's just really, really inefficient. This card is not great. So yeah, that is Empower. As I said, I think this keyword has very, very high potential, but the facts that you're getting off of Empower are just not good right now. And there needs to be a big improvement in the next 2 sets because I'm assuming that this keyword will probably get rotated, well, not rotated out, but will get cycled out for a new one at the beginning of year 3 like the original 5 keywords were. So that's the assumption I'm operating under for now until we see anything that proves differently. Yeah, this needs a much better Empower effect in the next 2 sets if it's going to be anything notable. At the very least, Pyrus+Haos gave us a R Obliterator, so that's a good card. Good old one Jet Kuso, the invitational card. So yeah, with that said, next week we will be covering Sync. So look forward to that. But yeah, with that said, this is Hunter Church signing off.